When entering the world of games, people can become whoever they desire, such as a young character, regardless of their real-life age. This allows them to do things they can't outside the game, which is why these games are so wonderful. The 38-year-old protagonist starts by creating his character to begin a game called One More Free Life Online. He names his avatar Earth and makes him look quite youthful, approximately his real-life age, not forgetting his black hair and eyes. In reality, he was just an ordinary salaryman who could only spare 2 or 3 hours a day for gaming. Therefore, he preferred playing alone to avoid inconveniencing other players. For this reason, he builds his character to be unattractive, even selecting so-called trash abilities. Out of the 10 abilities he chooses, 6 are quite poor, like a bow that never hits its target and the herbalist skill, which is unnecessary in the game since anyone can buy cheap potions from an NPC. He also takes his skill for an extremely weak kick, wind magic that doesn't work against fire or earth elements, and concealment, which has a high MP cost. Lastly, he takes physical skills enhancement, which can be used for running, using weapons, and crafting, but is superficial. He finalizes his character with the intention of being avoided by other players and enjoying peace. And so Earth begins playing One More Free Life Online, where the objective is simply to enjoy life. As it's not a game with a grand mission like defeating the Demon King, players can do as they please, whether it's fighting monsters, crafting items, or just chatting with others, living a carefree life. He starts in a bustling area where a girl named Mian offers to sell him some equipment. However, Earth suddenly collides with a troublemaker player wearing golden armor and accompanied by a group of Mohawks. He mocks Earth for using a useless bow and kicks him, acting quite unnecessarily before leaving. Subsequently, Earth continues to the training center, where he decides to hone his archery skills. However, the bow is so terrible that even after multiple attempts, he doesn't come close to hitting the target. But after shooting about 100 arrows, he finally begins to make progress, hitting the target and reaching level 5 in that skill. Next, Earth trains his wind magic and his kick, and after learning the minimum he needs, he heads out to the field. But upon arriving, he encounters chaos and thinks it's better to focus on collecting herbs for now. So Earth sets out in search of his collection, using his distance vision to locate some of the herbs. However, he realizes he can't analyze them right away. It doesn't take him long to raise his herbalist skill to level 3, allowing him to see the categories of each plant. With this, he can analyze their functions, discovering that he had collected 2 herbs that momentarily stopped breathing, wondering why the game placed them in an initial area. Afterward, Earth buys a beginner's potion production set at the potion shop to make a healing potion. He follows all the necessary steps, obtaining the item he wanted. In that game, after producing the item, you could choose the option to produce in bulk, making several items at once. Then he makes an antidote as well, raising the herbalist skill to level 7. With the healing potion and antidote ready, he returns to the field for his first hunt, glad to see the place had finally emptied. Suddenly, Earth spots a horned rabbit. He concentrates to hit the small creature on the first try since he couldn't shoot in sequence with his bow. However, the rabbit senses his presence, dodges the arrow, and attacks Earth. The boy then launches another arrow, hitting the animal's leg, but this only makes the rabbit angrier. With no other choice, Earth gives up on his bow and uses his kicking ability to protect himself. After kicking the rabbit twice, he finally manages to successfully finish his first hunt, obtaining the monster's skin and meat. He thinks that this way he'll end up becoming an expert in kicking rather than archery, when he's startled by 2 players who had witnessed his hunt. They introduce themselves as Zwei and Millie and add Earth to their friend list. Later, Earth continues his hunting to gain more experience and reduce the time it takes to defeat a monster. He locates another horned rabbit, but just like the previous one, it notices his presence and flees, forcing Earth to give up on using his bow and try another skill, using his wind magic to hit the monster. He thinks of a way to hide his presence, remembering he had the concealment ability. So by activating this skill, Earth finally manages to hunt with his bow, surprised at how well that combination worked. However, despite wanting to play all night, it was already late in the day, and he needed to get some rest for work the next day. And so after working, Earth returns to the game. He buys a piece of bread from an NPC, but it tastes bad. Since he can taste the game's food, Earth decides to cook something more appetizing. He cooks a horned rabbit meat, but it turns out extremely tough. Therefore, he prepares another piece of meat, testing a different way to cook the dish, which turns out much better than the previous one. Then Earth continues cooking to further improve his culinary skill in the game until he makes a dish with such a delicious aroma that it attracts several players who are nearby. Before he knows it, Earth realizes there is a crowd willing to pay a good price for a plate of steak, shelling out 20 times what he paid for a piece of bread. However, people were hungry and impatient, leaving Earth desperate to cook as many dishes as possible, until after cooking several times, he reaches level 20 in that skill, gaining the power of fast cooking. With this, he manages to quickly fulfill orders until that nightmare is over. Later, he decides to make a better bow to use in his hunts since there was no demand for that type of weapon, and he had to create one himself. After some time chopping wood and more, Earth finally finishes his new bow, which, while still a weak weapon against monsters, was better than the beginner's bow he had. However, he decides to experiment with strengthening the bow using more wood, making the weapon slightly more potent. Satisfied with his work, Earth goes to buy some armor. He then analyzes the levels of each skill, seeing that he was already at level 25 in cooking. Suddenly, he remembers that he had just spent most of his money to buy the armor. So to recoup that money, he decides to use the game's vending machines to try selling grape-flavor healing potions to see if players would like them. Later, he heads out to the field to hunt some monsters, and while analyzing the ones nearby, he chooses the nearest wolf. After activating concealment, he shoots with his bow. Earth then proceeds to his next hunt, training his kick and wind magic as well. He defeats several monsters, acquiring various types of items and increasing the levels of his 3 attacks. However, after hunting so much, he runs out of arrows and decides to call it a day. When he returns, he sees that some players had already gone to the vending machine and bought his grape potion, with some comments expressing their approval and requesting more, which makes Earth quite happy. But when he arrives in town, he is confronted with a desperate crowd in search of healing potions. This puzzles Earth as they could buy as many potions as they wanted from the NPCs. To understand what was happening, he calls Zwei. Earth tells him that when he returned from hunting, all the players in town were searching for potions. Zwei explains that not long ago, the NPCs announced that the potions had run out, causing everyone to frantically search for more. Zwei then warns that this situation will likely fall on Earth, as he had just sold potion juice. Only at that moment does Earth realize that his friend was right, as he was already surrounded by players eager to buy some of his potion. Earth tries to calm the people down by explaining that since there are so many of them, he'll have to set a purchase limit for each player, allowing each to take 5 potions. Everyone is thrilled with the number, but impatient ones quickly appear, urging Earth. Fortunately, Zwei and Millie step in to help, with him organizing the people while she handles the accounting. This leaves Earth to focus solely on production. Since very few players had the herbalist skill, which allowed them to make potions as it had been considered a useless skill, until that moment, Earth is quite overwhelmed, working tirelessly to avoid player disputes over the lack of potions. He activates the mass production capability, but after a long time making potions, his medicinal herbs run out. So he informs the players that he can only sell the remaining potions, which won't be enough for everyone. People understand the situation and ask Earth to make more potions the next day. But at that moment, the troublemaker player appears, accompanied by his group of Mohawks, and demands that Earth hand over all the healing potions to him. Earth explains that the few remaining potions were for the people waiting in line, but the player is not willing to accept no for an answer. Zwei tries to maintain order, but the guy punches him, causing him to fall to the ground, making it clear what would happen if Earth opposed him. However, Earth shows that the guy's attitude was annoying the other players. He then offers to pay for the potions, but Earth says that's not the problem, as cutting in line would make him unpopular with other players, including the producers, which would certainly hinder his ability to buy essential in-game items like weapons and armor. Therefore, it's crucial to maintain a good relationship with other players. Instead of listening to Earth's advice, the guy challenges him to a duel to prove he's superior to a mere archer. Zwei tells Earth not to accept the challenge, but he's not willing to run away from the fight and let an aggressive player like that come out on top. So Earth accepts the duel and decides to take advantage of the player's confidence to spot his weaknesses. As soon as the fight begins, the player attacks with his sword, but Earth dodges the blow and launches a kick, followed by 2 arrows, ending the duel rather quickly. Immediately, his friends flee with the unconscious player, and everyone celebrates Earth's victory. Seeing his potential, Zwei and Millie decide to invite Earth to join their group. Then, after notifying all the players that he will continue to make potions the next day, Earth logs out of the game. He thinks about how the group of Mohawks should be shunned by production players due to their unnecessary attitude. As soon as he leaves his room, Zwei sends him a message, asking if Earth is interested in forming a group. A few days after the incident with the lack of potions, the herbalist skill was revived in the game. After all, it had become a useful skill due to the item limit imposed on NPC sales. And so the protagonist started the game as usual, but this would be the first day that Earth would be part of a group in that world, joining Zwei's team called Blue. Since Earth only knew Zwei and Millie from the group, the other members introduced themselves to him. One of them was a girl named Nora, who claimed to be skilled in melee combat due to her sword. Next, he met Rage, a tank wielding an axe and shield responsible for drawing enemy attacks. Finally, Earth met Casimine, a one-handed swordsman. After getting to know everyone, Earth began to introduce himself. However, everyone already knew he was an archer, and Zwei explained that he had become quite famous among players after winning the duel against the Mohawk guy. So he skipped the introductions but asked if the group was indeed balanced since they had 4 frontline members, Millie as a magic user and himself as an archer. The group explained that Millie could use magic with various attributes including damage dealing, and that Nora could also use healing magic, providing support during melee combat. They explained that they were determined to hunt a wild bear, even though it was a very tough enemy in the game. Earth couldn't help but wonder where all this confidence came from. He mentioned it would be his first time hunting a bear and expressed his concerns, as the bear was known to be fast and intelligent. But no one seemed willing to back down from the challenge, agreeing to go for the hunt and then enjoy a delicious meal prepared by Earth. And so the archer participated in his first team hunt. He used his long-range vision to analyze the nearby enemies, noticing that all the wild bears were traveling in groups. Eventually, he found one that was alone. With the target located, they decided to lure the bear to a more advantageous location for their fight. The blue team recognized the Earth Hunter's joy that he was already being helpful. Millie cast a spell on Zwei, and Earth explained that he would move away to use his concealment skill. They sprang into action, with Earth firing his first arrow. However, this only enraged the wild bear. Rage performed his role, drawing the enemy's attention. In the game's battle mechanics, there was a hidden parameter called Hate, where the monster demonstrated its anger and rage. A high defense tank attracted all the hate to protect the other players. While Earth moved to a safe distance to keep the creature in his sights, Rage still took some damage from the bear as it was a formidable foe. However, Millie promptly aided him with her healing magic. Nora asked him to keep the bear's attention on her for attacking, but they soon realized that the monster's hide was tough and resistant to their weapons. Even Nora and the others found it challenging to pierce through. Millie's magic finally dealt some damage to the creature. The battle continued, with Rage maintaining the bear's focus on him, while Nora provided healing support to mitigate the damage. However, the group started to realize that they might have rushed into confronting such a powerful enemy. Their weapons had limited effect on the bear, and Nora was running low on MP for healing. Earth understood that the team needed a quick and precise decision. He decided to trust his 38 years of life experience and aim for the bear's forehead, hoping it might be a weak spot, determined to help his team. Earth's arrow hit the bear, but it only made the bear angrier, and they all began to worry that they might not survive this hunt. However, Earth hoped that the arrow had failed because it was too shallow and decided to use his last resort. He activated a spell he acquired at level 15 of wind magic, needing to act quickly since it only lasts for 10 seconds. With this, Earth significantly increases his speed, intensifying his kicking power to push the arrow and pierce the bear's forehead. Next, Zwei shouts for Millie to attack, and she once again casts her magic, allowing the team to finally succeed in that hunt and put an end to the wild bear. Zwei apologizes for suggesting they go after a wild bear, acknowledging that it wasn't a good decision. However, Earth says that everything turned out well, and now it's time for them to enjoy the new dish he prepared, which excites them all. And so, they all enjoy a wolf skewer, savoring the seasonings that Earth used to prepare the meal. Zwei wonders why he's the only one not given a skewer, having to settle for a mere piece of bread. After teasing his friend for a bit, Earth finally admits he was just joking, giving Zwei a skewer and making him very happy. He savors the meat, enamored with the taste, and Nora asks Earth if the recipe for the food is expensive. He explains that in reality, there's no way to obtain recipes through exchange because it's become a secret understanding among producers not to sell recipes. He mentions that first of all, it takes a lot of money and time to create a recipe, and secondly, even with a recipe, the result of the food can vary because it depends on the effort and ingenuity of the person who made it. For these reasons, the game's producers concluded that it's impossible to imitate the quality of other players' production. So since they can't buy Earth's meat skewer recipe, Zwei suggests they pay a low price for him to cook for their team, which irritates Earth as it's not right to place a value on someone else's work, but it makes the rest of the team very happy. At the end of the day, Earth adds the other members of the group as friends and continues the rest of his journey alone, hunting other enemies and expanding the game's area by heading to the forest of the 5th area. There, he encounters new monsters like giant insects. He tries to hit one of them with his bow but ends up missing and hitting an ant instead, leaving it agitated. This is a swift ant with a connection ability, and quickly, it calls his fellow ants. Even though he's in trouble, Earth decides to fight using his kicks. However, he discovers that these insects have a retaliation damage effect, which makes his body numb. After receiving a lot of attacks from the ants, Earth ends up dying and is automatically transported back to the city. Upon arriving there, he receives a game notification, informing all players that they will soon have a major update called the Fairy Dance, which will introduce new skills and arts, expand production possibilities, and give each player a fairy to assist in battles and other tasks. Earth realizes it's not a good time to receive a death penalty, as soon everyone will be leveling up with this update. He trains hard to acquire the blacksmithing skill, which will allow him to improve his attacks and craft a more efficient arrow against the swift ant. After some work, Earth manages to create an iron arrow with a triangular shape, with an attack power of 6, and after a few adjustments, he finalizes it with an apple-shaped tip, increasing the arrow's attack power to 8. Next, he decides to create equipment to enhance his kicking power because besides being a weak attack, it's not effective against enemies that can deal retaliation damage. After some thought, Earth decides to add spikes to the soles of his shoes and blades on the sides. As he works on his new gear, another player named Black asks what he's doing. After some time, both of them see the final result, and Black admits he's never seen a kick assist item like that. Other players also admire the creative shoe weapon. Then Earth goes to buy a bowstring from Myun, who finds his new shoes rather eerie for a cook. Afterward, he searches for a new bow, aiming to upgrade it now that he's reached level 30 in that skill. He evaluates his 3 options, first considering the short bow, which is easy to use but has limited range, which he dismisses as he's not good in close-range fights. Then he looks at the long bow, which offers more range and power but takes a long time to draw, which isn't suitable for solo play. This leaves Earth with the hunting bow, which has good size and shooting range. He specializes in this advanced skill, reaching level 1. With everything prepared, Earth names his new weapon the Hunting Composite Bow X, and when he tests it, he notices the improvement in his weapon, bidding farewell to the old one, which despite being inferior to the current one, had been useful to him until that point. Now that he has improved, he goes in search of a swift ant. Combining wind magic with the bow, he defeats the enemy with 2 shots. He continues hunting more insects, getting his revenge and collecting plenty of ant exoskeletons, which can be used to create lightweight armor. He takes the material to Myun, who is an armor craftswoman. Then the game announces that the fairy dance is about to begin, and the first part of that stage is each player receiving an auxiliary fairy. Earth receives his contract crystal, which contains his fairy. He hopes to get a wind-based one to complement his abilities. However, when he begins the ritual, the crystal shatters and no fairy appears, leaving him frustrated. At that moment, he receives a call from Zwei, asking him to meet up with the group. When he arrives, he shows the result of his crystal and asks if this happened to Zwei, but Zwei shows he has his fairy, as does everyone else, each of them having received a little companion. In other words, Earth is the only one without a fairy. To lift his spirits, Millie tells him not to give up as they're only in the first part of the mission. And since his crystal hasn't disappeared, there must be another chance for him to make the contract. She believes that there's probably something in the second part of the mission, which encourages Earth to remain hopeful. However, they don't understand why their fairies liked him so much and are a bit jealous of it. Earth finds them all very cute and hopes he can get his own fairies soon. A few days later, Earth continued to attract the fairies to him even without having his own fairy, as his contract crystal had broken. He played with one of the fairies and after a while decided to take a look at his profile. There, he saw that his skills had improved, now allowing him to acquire superior abilities for even more ways to fight. Next, Earth embarked on his first dungeon exploration. He walked through the darkness of the cave, reminiscing about exploring places like that when he was a child, having fun knowing he could relive this experience thanks to the game. However, now it was even more thrilling. Suddenly, in a darker section, Earth encountered a giant spider. He shot an arrow at the creature and then unleashed several wind magic attacks, but the spider resisted. He then attempted to strike but accidentally hit his head on the cave ceiling. Nevertheless, he recovered quickly and snared the spider with a rope and delivered a kick, managing to defeat it. He celebrated the victory, though his head still throbbed from the impact. At that moment, several dark fairies appeared and Earth realized they wanted him to follow them. So Earth followed the fairies using a new ability called Gravity Center Stabilization, allowing him to traverse the path without stumbling. Later, he realized he had finally arrived at the place they desired as all the fairies were gathered in one spot. Upon looking where they were, Earth moved a stone that was in the way, revealing a secret door with a chest behind it. He was excited to be in the exploration phase of the game and upon opening the chest, found an ancient ring. Despite not knowing its purpose, Earth decided to keep it. He thanked the fairies for helping him find the item just as he received a game notification announcing the second part of the fairy dance would finally be revealed. Earth headed to the city where the game announced that the name of the second part of the event was Battle with the Fairies. After participating in battles and PvP fights, fairies would be able to evolve and take on new forms. The game emphasized that this would only happen if players battled with different people, providing an excellent opportunity for them to get to know other players. Additionally, the top 16 in the PvP would be invited to the tournament, with special prizes for the winners. Another update included titles and distinctions that players would receive based on their gameplay style. The game also informed players like Earth who hadn't acquired fairies could restore their contract crystals through special PvP, not only guaranteeing success, but also offering a higher chance of obtaining a rare fairy. The game also stated that from now on, fairies would have self-identity, leading to changes in their behavior. After the announcement, all players began discussing the news as there were many changes to digest. Earth noticed that players were excited about the changes, but he feared that players might start bothering the artisans who didn't enjoy PvP. However, later he met Black, who explained that it wouldn't be a problem for them as all the artisans agreed that any player who bothered them or tried to force a fight should be reported to everyone. In other words, it would be left in peace because no player was foolish enough to become an enemy of an entire guild. Black then asked Earth if he had visited the newly discovered city. The city was named Nexia and had a teleportation portal, so players could come and go as they pleased. Black explained that serious PvP players were gathering there to battle, and Earth asked if Black would participate. However, he replied that being an artisan suited him better, and he would leave the fighting to other players. Earth realized that there were indeed many ways to enjoy an event like this and contemplated how he would make the most of it. The next day, Earth decided to check the additional titles he had received. This caught the attention of other players as they were all expecting Earth to receive a rare title. He discovered he had been awarded the title Fairy Charmer, which made all the fairies love him, explaining a lot. Earth didn't particularly like his title because it drew a lot of attention, but he could only remove it by participating in a special PvP during the event. Because of this, Earth asked if anyone would be willing to fight him. A girl named Rona heard his request and sent him a fight invitation. She had heard of Earth before because she was also part of the blue group Zwei's guild. Rona mentioned that she had always wanted to talk to him as he fought with kicks and she was skilled in martial arts. Earth thanked Rona for agreeing to fight him, but suddenly his fairy, a bird, flew to his shoulder. Rona found this strange because the bird was usually very timid. However, it had taken such a liking to Earth that it refused to fight him, proving to everyone that he was indeed a fairy charmer. This made Rona jealous as her fairy had never shown any affection to her and had already warmed up to Earth, while he became even more desperate to fight someone. Unfortunately, this situation repeated itself several times, with all the fairies refusing to battle him. Later, Rona called Earth to ask for a favor, and Earth quickly guessed what she wanted. The girl wanted Earth to cook something for her fairy to eat because it wasn't eating properly, just like the fairies of dozens of other players who wanted the same. It all began when Earth met a player who had trouble feeding his fairy with the bread sold by NPCs, as the bread was genuinely bad. The player asked him to cook something for his fairy, as if Earth could make something as delicious as his steak. He could also cook tasty food for the fairies. Because Earth agreed to help, the news spread, and now he had to cook for a line of people, even limiting them to 3 cakes each. After some time, his service slowed down and he managed to complete all the orders, thanks to Rona, who helped by finding other cooks to prepare fairy food. She then asked Earth what he was planning to do now that his service had finished, and Earth replied that he had been cooking for a long time, so he wanted to do something different. Rona invited Earth to go to the new city with her. The two of them used the portal to quickly reach Nexia, where they immediately saw an area where PvP battles were taking place and decided to watch. One of the players in the battle had a bird fairy like Rona, while the other had a wolf. Earth and Rona noticed that the wolf was behaving strangely. As the battle began, the two players faced off, but when the owner of the wolf fairy asked it to attack, the creature refused to obey. Taking advantage of this, the opponent attacked with the help of his fairy and won the battle. Earth then understood what was happening. He explained to Rona that the wolf player was a fairy abuser, which is what players were calling those who use fairies abusively, such as hitting or speaking rudely to them, causing them to stop following commands. The player became quite angry with the wolf, shouting aggressively at it. Earth thought the situation would escalate because he recalled a video he had seen where a fairy abuser had mistreated his fairy so much that, as a penalty, she evolved drastically, and the game forced a battle between them, after which the player lost his contract with the fairy. However, the wolf player managed to control his anger, and Earth deduced that he knew what would happen if he lost his temper. Rona said she didn't know anything about this. Earth explained that penalties like this were common in older games, and even though modern games were gentler with players, this one opted for a more old-school approach. Earth thought he had played enough for the day and said goodbye to Rona. The girl thanked him again for the food for her fairy. After bidding her farewell, he disconnected from the game. He thought about how some players took great care of their fairies like Rona, while others, for some reason, chose to treat them violently. However, it was a matter of personal choice. But when Earth returned to the game the next day, he was surprised because the player with the wolf fairy appeared to seek his help, given Earth's title as a fairy charmer. He asked for advice on how to reconcile with the wolf since Earth had seen the video of a player attacked by his fairy after she reached her limit, and he didn't want the same to happen to him. While the wolf licked his face, Earth asked why the player had treated him poorly. The player explained that he didn't know how to behave with fairies and had watched videos of other players. However, all the videos showed them treating fairies like circus animals. So he thought he had to follow the same path as those players, but realized his mistake when the second phase of the update brought about a change in fairy behavior. He revealed that after that, the fairy stopped listening to him, and in an attempt to regain her obedience, he ended up hitting her several times, which only made the situation worse. The player admitted that he shouldn't have acted that way and pleaded with Earth to help him find a solution, even offering to pay for his assistance. However, Earth said he didn't want anything in return to avoid making it a habit. Earth told the player that he just had to treat his fairy well, taking care of her like a friend, and advised him to do everything together with his fairy, including resting, eating, and fighting, always thanking her for her assistance. He said that when the player started taking care of his fairy, she would become obedient again. Then the player remembered that Earth was a cook who made fairy food and asked him to make something for his wolf to win the fairy over with food. Earth agreed to help. Earth prepared some horned rabbit Kara-age for the wolf. Once it was ready, the player took one and approached his fairy with trepidation, as she wasn't pleased with him at all. However, after sniffing the snack for a while, the fairy decided to eat it, giving the player an opportunity to get closer. As a result, the fairy began to trust him again, and the player was moved to have finally won back his fairy. He thanked Earth for his help. The boy was happy to have assisted and started to accept his title better. However, as he bid them farewell, a man named Silver called out to Earth. He introduced himself as Silver and asked to talk to him privately, away from prying ears. During the night, Earth decides to visit an isolated cabin to have a private conversation with Silver. Earth notices that all of Silver's equipment is top-notch and concludes that he must be one of the best-ranked players currently and a hardcore gamer who invests many hours in the game. Silver then sits down and tells Earth he'll be straightforward, asking if he has seen a man named Glad. Earth thinks for a few seconds but says he hasn't seen anyone by that name. Silver relaxes a bit and says that Glad would be after the player who holds the title of Fairy Enthrallor, a title that Earth possesses. Earth then asks Silver who this Glad is, and Silver responds that he used to be a permanent member of his group, a player with behavior issues, but because he was a highly skilled tank, he had a spot in the group. Earth recognizes that if Silver is talking about this in the past tense, it means Glad is no longer part of the group. Silver explains that Glad became too arrogant and started belittling other players. But things got worse at the start of the fairy event, as Glad was the only one in his group who couldn't make a contract with a fairy, just like Earth. This led Glad to become frustrated and vent his anger on everyone, and as Silver was the group leader, his only choice was to banish Glad. Silver then summons his fairy to continue the conversation. He made a contract with a Valkyrie of Light fairy who is extremely strong and had a perfect humanoid form. Silver continues the story, saying that everything he tried to do to console Glad only made him angrier until finally in the last game update, Glad obtained another crystal, allowing him to make a contract with a fairy known as the Dark Fox. Since then, Glad has been challenging various players to special PvE matches whenever he can. Earth realizes that even with a fairy, Glad still feels humiliated, and that's why he's doing this. Silver agrees, saying that Glad probably wants to demonstrate his power in the championship that will take place on the last day of the fairy event, warning Earth once again to be careful not to get involved with him. Earth thanks Silver for the warning, and Silver says he'll have to deal with Glad during the championship. Silver leaves with his fairy, leaving Earth thinking that it's dangerous to believe a story when you only know one side of it, but he decides it's better to be cautious. He then decides to go monster hunting because this way he can continue playing safely. In the game's terms, it's against the rules for one player to challenge another to a PvP match while the other player is fighting monsters. So even if Glad is really after him, Earth can stay safe by hunting monsters. He uses his bow to shoot an arrow in the forehead of a wild bear, but it doesn't bring the animal down immediately, only making it angry. As the bear charges toward Earth, he decides to use his new technique called Mirror Arrow, which allows him to create 2 copies of himself, making all 3 shoot simultaneously, effectively delivering 3 attacks at once. However, the bear remains alive, prompting Earth to use his whip to entangle its legs and pull it to the ground. Earth then finishes off the opponent with a powerful kick. After the fight, he realizes how challenging it is to take down a bear alone, but he decides to continue with this strategy. Earth earns enough points to improve his skills and decides to enhance his kick, learning a new technique called Sliding Charge, which allows him to strike the enemy with a charge or quickly escape danger. This is his first kicking technique. Next, Earth decides to search for minerals in the mines near the Nexia region to gather high-quality materials for making steel or lightweight metal to improve his equipment. During his mining work, he accidentally hits an explosive ore nugget. He quickly warns those nearby to take cover, while carefully storing the explosive metal. After resolving the issue, Earth apologizes to the other players who thank him for alerting them and preventing a massive explosion that could have caused significant damage. With the ores in hand, Earth goes to Black and asks to borrow his forge. He spends the entire night crafting a twisted arrowhead from the bear leather he acquired. After many hours of work, he finally creates an arrowhead that can cause bleeding when it hits the target. With the remaining metal, he decides to make a flexible steel whip that can also inflict bleeding effects. The next day, Earth goes to the processing room basement, where he conducts experiments with the explosive ore he found, even though it involves a field of knowledge that is not his expertise. However, he feels safe in that room, knowing that he won't risk anyone's life if something goes wrong. This allows him to experiment freely using his herbalism skill. In the end, Earth manages to create 3 mixtures, A, B, and C. He then goes to a remote area to test the strength of the explosions, tossing the first vial with mixture A, which breaks on the ground without causing any significant explosion. Earth then throws the vial with mixture B, and it results in a massive explosion, destroying a considerable area and depleting 80% of Earth's health. He decides to keep this mixture for extreme situations when he might need to sacrifice himself to defeat a monster and names it Infernal Mine Oil. Due to the damage he sustains, Earth needs to consume a healing potion. He proceeds to throw the last vial with mixture C, which causes a mild explosion, exactly what Earth was looking for. He names this mixture Fortified Oil. Next, Earth heads to the field to test his new mixture. There, he encounters a group of 3 wild bears. He begins the battle by using the fortified oil on the creatures, and then attacks with his arrows, wind magic, and steel whip. This makes the battle much easier, allowing him to defeat the 3 bears quickly and effectively. However, Earth acknowledges that he shouldn't rely on consumable items too much, as it won't improve his skills. He reaches level 50 with the hunting bow and wind magic, gaining 2 new abilities, Gatling Arrow and Fly. These abilities unlock another secret skill called Wind Bow, which combines the skills of the bow and wind magic. Choosing this skill would prevent Earth from acquiring advanced skills in both hunting bow and wind magic, but he decides to take this new skill. Later, Earth tests his 2 new abilities and finds that Gatling Arrow allows him to shoot in rapid succession. Although he can only fire twice in his current level, Fly enables him to use wind support magic, allowing him to jump high. Afterward, Earth takes his hunting materials to the city and orders a cloak made from the bear leather he acquired. Suddenly, an announcement for players is displayed stating that the PvP Championship for the Fairy event has selected its participants based on score calculations. At this moment, Sway and Millie appear and comment that none of them in their group likely made it to the top 16 participants, as none of them focused much on PvP battles. The game provides the list of selected players, and the 3 realize that 2 players stood out for their numerous victories, Silver and Glad. Earth is concerned about the relationship between the 2, but is also eager to watch them fight. Several players gather at the championship server to watch the battles. From the arena stands, Earth, Zwei, and Millie eagerly await the matches. Earth uses his special vision skill and spots 2 other players with the same Fairy Enthriller title, which eases his mind, knowing he's not the only one with that title. The battles begin, and Earth notices that the winning fairies are absorbing the energy of the defeated ones, something that doesn't occur in regular PvP battles. Finally, the highly anticipated moment of the final battle arrives. Silver and Glad step into the arena to face each other. Earth, who had anticipated the showdown, watches with keen interest. Inside the ring, Silver tells Glad that he felt the need to correct him for his mistakes, and the only way to do that was by defeating him. Glad doesn't back down, but instead becomes excited and prepares to fight. The battle commences, and Silver quickly advances with his axe toward Glad, who responds by saying he was already familiar with Silver's tactics. Thanks to the numerous times he had watched Silver fight, he knew that Silver's strategy was to charge at the enemy with his axe to try to destabilize his opponent. However, the trick doesn't work, and Glad counterattacks, while his Dark Fox Fairy battles Silver's Valkyrie of Light Fairy on equal footing. Silver sees an opening and attempts to strike Glad with his Moon Crescent move, but Glad swiftly slides backward using Wind Boost, the wind magic skill, surprising Earth because he didn't know that Glad was a wind magic user. Glad takes advantage of Silver being airborne due to the missed attack and delivers a powerful blow followed by a strong attack from his Dark Fox Fairy, ultimately making Glad the champion of the competition. By absorbing the energy of Silver's Valkyrie, the Dark Fox evolves into a humanoid fox. She explains that the purpose of the event was to select the next fairy ruler. The fairies received a prophecy that the king must be strong and understand the art of war, something that wasn't a common trait among fairies, as they are peaceful creatures. So they joined forces with humans who are masters of warfare to gain that experience, allowing the Fox Fairy to acquire the necessary knowledge to become the ruler. Glad asks if she will discard him now that she no longer needs him. She replies that the other fairies won't distance themselves from him, but she will, as their contract is now over. Since all Glad wanted was to use the fairy as a tool for revenge, she used him to win the championship. However, she offers Glad a reward of money and a bonus, as well as the opportunity to contract with a fairy as strong as she was before evolving. Glad declines the proposal and challenges the fox fairy to a fight. She accepts, saying that if he wins, she will obey him again, but if he loses, he won't receive the money or the bonus. They begin the battle, but Glad quickly gets pummeled, proving that the fox is now on a level far above what he can handle. After winning, the fox fairy states that 3 people deserve a reward, bringing Earth and the other 2 players with the same title as him to her. She explains that the 2 others were the only ones who refused to fight using their fairies. As a reward, she allows their fairies to evolve. For Earth, who didn't have a fairy, she presents a different offer. She tells him he can fight her once, leaving Earth entirely confused about whether he liked his reward or not. Now that only Earth remains, the Fairy Queen suggests that he battles her right there in the combat arena. The boy becomes confused, and the fairy says that since he's been at the event the whole time without a fairy, she would like to ensure a better reward. So they would fight, and regardless of the outcome, she would donate some of her powers. Earth accepts the challenge, and everyone in the arena eagerly awaits this fight. He prepares for the battle by organizing his items and planning the best way to win. It wouldn't be easy, as was evident in the previous fight. The Fairy Queen has mastery over very powerful magics like the High Explosion. He has a slight advantage because he has already seen her fighting style, and she probably has never fought an archer before. However, that wouldn't be enough due to his poor abilities. Besides, he couldn't prolong the fight as the fairy could adapt quickly. Thus, he comes to the conclusion that the only way to win would be to play dirty. The fairy asks if he's ready, and he responds in the affirmative. The combat begins, and the blue dome of the arena rises. As soon as the clock marks the start, Archer moves and uses his sliding charge to distance himself from the opponent. Already at a reasonable distance, he uses his bow to shoot an arrow with 70% of its strength, just to initiate and test the Fairy Queen's abilities. When he fires, the fairy uses Winter Cutter to cancel the archer's attack and neutralize the arrow's strength. He thinks that maybe if he uses full force, he can hit her, but without much time to think, the fairy launches the Fire Lance, and Earth needs to dodge this attack made of fire arrows coming from above. While he dodges, he shoots an arrow that pierces the fairy's attack and hits her squarely in the shoulder, nullifying her magic. In the stands, his friends watch this excitedly and are impressed by Earth's speed and power. The Fairy Queen realizes that continuing the fight at that distance would be very disadvantageous for her. She then uses her Wind Booster ability to advance at high speed towards Earth to get closer to her opponent. However, the fairy didn't anticipate that the archer was already expecting this move, as he had seen it in the fight against Glad. So when the fairy is about to launch her shock, Earth quickly dodges horizontally and breaks one of his vials in the air with a death potion. This potion, made from asphyxiation herb, produces a toxic purple mist that hinders the fairy and prevents her from casting any magic. With this, Earth gains time to throw more explosive potions. The fairy recognizes that not restricting the use of items was a mistake, and Earth states that weak humans like him need to think carefully about how to defeat someone much stronger. She then conjures the Earth Wall ability to protect herself from any threats, but she also can't attack. Earth disappears, and his friends notice that he has used his Consummate ability. Inside her stone defense, the fairy waits for Earth's attack, but he remains still. She can't even feel his presence and imagines he's waiting for her magic to run out. So to surprise her, the fairy decides to make the attacking move. As soon as her magic ends and she's exposed again in the arena, she strikes with her ready wand but doesn't see anyone. Unaware, Earth appears behind her and restrains her using his steel whip. The archer then initiates his sequence of attacks, starting with sliding charge to destabilize her, going directly for her legs and knocking the bound fairy down. He then uses his Gatling arrow ability, landing a perfect combo of 6 arrows, causing a stun. Without rest, he launches Mirror Arrow, and with the help of 2 other summoned clones, they perform a triple attack that adds to the previous combo, now totaling 9. Next, he uses Twin Fanged Arrow, hitting the fairy more times and increasing his combo to 12. To finish, he uses Fly to gain altitude and conclude his attack with Wind Boost, boosting the damage from all of his previous attacks. In disbelief, the Fairy Queen is defeated and Earth emerges as the victor. Everyone in the arena who was watching the fight applauds the archer. He is surprised because he had almost forgotten that he was being watched by so many people. His plan to go unnoticed in the game was not going well, so he considers fleeing. However, the fairy congratulates Earth and acknowledges that her overconfidence led her to underestimate the boy. After the fight, she learned an important lesson. Since Earth won, it's time for his reward. The fairy asks him to hand over his broken contract crystal and the base for the Fairy King ring. He is confused about the ring but remembers it's the item he found earlier. As the Fairy Queen takes the crystal, she notices that there are already 5 lights inside it, showing how truly special Earth was. As his personal gift, the fairy grants 1 more light, making it 6 in the crystal. She then merges the 2 into a ring with a green stone. She tries to put the ring on Earth's left ring finger, but he resists and asks her to be gentle. The fairy asks what the problem is, and he questions why she's putting a ring on his engagement finger, not wanting this supposed marriage. The fairy insists, and they get into a hand battle until she gets tired and uses her firearm power, gaining strength and finally forcing the ring onto Earth's finger. He complains that it's not fair, but she doesn't care. She asks him to take care of it, while he struggles to remove the jewel that won't come off at all. When he looks at the stats, he discovers that it's the ring of the 87th Fairy Queen, a unique item in the world that contains the power of 6 elemental fairies. Whoever wears it can access the fairy realm, and to Earth's dismay, it cannot be unequipped. The fairy then bids farewell to everyone and returns to her realm, disappearing from the arena. Everyone applauds, thoroughly pleased with the event, praising how much fun it was, with a touch of romantic comedy at the end. And so the first major event of One More Free Life Online, the Dance with the Fairies, comes to an end. After the event, some things changed in that world. Earth's battle with the Fairy Queen was featured on the game's official website and became very popular, altering the way players perceived wind and bow magic from then on. Because of this, many players became inspired to use this style of play. Despite his efforts to avoid it, Earth became known. Because of this, he decided to avoid drawing even more attention to himself and started enjoying his game in secrecy. However, there was one company he couldn't evade. Using the power of the ring, the Fairy Queen appeared in the middle of Earth's gameplay, using the ring as a portal. She said she can give a lot of love to Earth since he was so lonely without any fairies. He got angry and hit the fairy on the head with a fan, asking her to return to her kingdom and let him play alone. She complained that being a queen was very tough and that she wanted some time to relax. It seems like his peaceful gaming days were over. Earth walked through the village and everyone noticed him, commenting on things like him being the Fairy Queen's husband and his clothes. Amidst this, a man tried to get Earth's attention, but he ignored him, fearing that he might want to intimidate him. The man insisted that the archer look at him, but Earth continued on his way without averting his gaze. He felt very tense in the city, so he thought it was better to go hunting. Earlier, Earth had asked the Fairy Queen to explain how Prism Nova magic worked, an ability only those with the ring could use. She replied that he would have to discover the proof himself. In a forest, he captured a bear with his steel whip and invoked the magic, asking the fairies to fulfill his wish. During the incantation, he offered some of his mana to the fairy governess so that she would grant him the power. A circle defining the area of effect appeared, and he placed the bear right in the center. Then he finally activated his Prism Nova enchantment, creating a ball of light over the marked area, hitting the target and transforming everything inside. He tested the enchantment several times on other bears and found that this ability had a random effect. Later, while Earth was cooking, the fairy confirmed that many status effects could occur, with the rarest being paralysis and petrification. Moreover, the cooldown time was long, so he needed to be careful. The fairy looked at one of the delicious dishes Earth was cooking and tried to take a bite, but he smacked her head with a fan again, saying they were for sale. The Fairy Queen asked him to let her eat, as the fairy realm's food was all sweet, and she would like to taste other things. She threw a tantrum and complained about the duties of being a queen, sometimes wishing it were different. And the man that Earth had ignored earlier in the village appeared, and he was angry with Earth for not talking to him. He introduced himself as Nazar, a member of the Apollo's Bow Guild. He and the other members were working towards a grand goal, the salvation of oppressed archers. He believed that Earth suffered because he was excluded and not part of any guild, but Earth didn't care and even got distracted while arranging his cooking equipment. Nazar, full of pride and conviction, offered Earth a spot in his guild, saying he could join at the lowest rank. Earth finished gathering his equipment and thanked him for the invitation, but declined and left with the fairy, leaving Nazar baffled. The two arrived in the city and set up a stall to sell the food Earth had prepared. The fairy didn't want to leave, and Earth decided she could take the food as long as she left him in peace for the rest of the day. She was pleased and he transferred the food, so she returned to the fairy realm. The next day, he went to the blacksmiths and found a group of apprentices. He asked Blacks, who explained that now that he was a prominent player, everyone wanted to watch him work on their weapons. Since there was no other choice, he agreed to let everyone watch. First, Earth improved his hunting composite bow in X. He replaced the worn-out bow and switched to higher quality wood for materials. For reinforcement, he used lightweight metal instead of iron. For his blade-tipped shoes, he also changed the material to lightweight metal to increase defense and stability when landing on the ground. To make the spikes, he used the twist he had learned from making arrows, thus increasing his attack power. Finally, the most important change. The blades. Instead of putting them on the sides, he adapted them to the front of the shoes so that his kicks caused damage from the front and with the sole. Moreover, they were now removable, making it easier to switch them. After the changes, he tested and demonstrated them in front of everyone and received a lot of applause. Everyone seemed impressed with his skills. However, instead of being happy, he thought it would be better if everyone thought he had done something weird. Earth then went to a merchant to buy the last item, a bear fur cape. He was impressed by the high item score. Since he had provided the material, the merchant charged a low price as promised. He thanked her since the cape was worth much more. Then, in a message from the Apollo's Bow Guild master, I Am, arrived for Earth. Later, he met all the members of the group. I Am introduced herself and said they were very pleased to meet him. Earth asked what the matter was today, and I Am apologized for the trouble caused by Nazar earlier. She explained that after his battle with the Fairy Queen, there was not a player and one more who didn't know him. Therefore, their Archer Guild would benefit from his inclusion. This was what Nazar thought. They had also discovered that he was using the name Earth without permission to recruit new players. Everyone, again, apologized on Nazar's behalf. Earth accepted the apologies and asked everyone to hold their heads high. IA informed him that a penalty had already been applied and Nazar was demoted from lieutenant to a regular member. He could no longer invite new people to the guild. Earth was understanding, and the two of them got along without any problems. Ian was very pleased, and to conclude, she praised the battle against the Fairy Queen. She said he was the hope for many archers and asked him to continue like this as everyone had high expectations. Earth bid farewell a bit frustrated as that match hadn't had the effect he wanted. He just wanted to relax and enjoy the game peacefully, but now everyone knew him. Registrations for the second round of players are now open. Our protagonist notices that they are allowing the same number of players as the existing ones and deduces that the new servers have already been installed. Furthermore, he's heard that the lack of VR and headsets has been resolved, which means that registrations won't remain open for long. Inside the game, Sway and Millie encounter Earth and ask how he's going to deal with the break arms, a new status effect added in the patch from the previous day. Earth is worried because if he were hit by this ability, he'd be unable to wield his weapon for a while. Moreover, the effect would also trigger if he received more than 25% of his total HP in arm damage. Earth thinks that at least other players can't steal his dropped weapon. He had played another game before and someone stole a rare weapon he dropped after dying. Then the game announces a new update for all players. A new dungeon is coming and its name is a Challenge of the Departed. The place is generated entirely randomly, so every time a player enters, it will be a completely new experience equipped with all kinds of traps waiting for unlucky players. Additionally, there's a 1-hour time limit and the main objective is to reach the 10th floor. Earth is excited about the challenge of a randomly generated dungeon. The game presents a preview trailer for the second round of player registrations. In this trailer, Zwei appears very happy and Earth during his battle against the Fairy Queen. However, Earth isn't very pleased with his appearance in the trailer because if new players think bows are strong weapons, they'll regret it later in the game. Later, Earth wants to be prepared for the dungeon challenge, but for that, he'll need a shield. He won't be able to advance further in the game if his only defense is evasion, especially in a cramped dungeon with no room to move freely. So he battles various creatures to specialize his shield skill, which also makes it easier to use his bow. Thanks to this, he can collect materials at the same time. After defeating some monsters, he goes to the blacksmith to craft new equipment. Blax asks what he's doing and Earth replies that he intends to make a new bow using some designs he brought from the real world. One of these designs is for a high attack bow even with a low score, but Earth doesn't intend to use it because its arrows are too expensive. He created it just to learn more about how it works, as he plans to design an even better, non-existent bow. After many sleepless nights, Earth finally completes his project and creates a secret light metal shield, using exoskeletons from the ant soldiers on the sides to reinforce it, and also protect the parts of his compound bow he placed at the back. As a result, the shield has a secret mechanism that transforms it into a bow. To switch between functions, he just needs to use the handle. Now, even if Earth is hit by the break arms, he won't immediately lose his long-range attack capability. On another day, the new update is available for installation. Because of this, the game is filled with players all excited about the major update. Many vendors sell potions to help with gameplay. Earth can't wait to take a look at the new dungeon. Suddenly, a group of 5 colorful warriors arrives to speak with Earth. Each one introduces themselves by a specific color and names themselves the Gang of the 6 Rangers. Earth is perplexed because this seems like a blatant copy of the Sentai Rangers. However, he notices there are only 5 of them and asks where the black one is. The Red Ranger responds that he had a stomachache, and Earth doesn't seem to believe that these guys are actual Rangers, but he decides to ignore it. Then Red says they were looking for another member to complete the group and found Earth, so he invites him to join them in the dungeon challenge. Earth considers the help, as it would be impossible to go very far alone. Thus, he accepts, and they venture together. In the dungeon, the Rangers are ready to proceed, but Earth tells them to wait. He uses his threat detection ability, and as he suspected, the place is full of traps. In that room, there are 15 traps, and 4 of them are instant death traps. Earth mentions that it's common for heroes to fall into these traps, and to prevent everyone from being caught, he goes ahead and asks them to follow his exact steps. The Blue Ranger comments to the Pink Ranger that Red made the right decision by inviting Earth, even though he was concerned about adding another member to the group. Upon hearing this, Earth is pleased and surprised that they made that decision. In reality, Red remarks that they were lucky to meet the guy who married the Fairy Queen because he couldn't possibly be weak. The group navigates through the traps, and Red says that from there he can take over the leadership. They proceed and encounter some skeleton soldiers. Red says the 5 members will defeat these enemies. They engage in combat with their weapons and defeat the skeletons without much trouble. Earth is impressed and understands why they call them heroes. Thus, he can focus on finding traps. They find the stairs to the 2nd floor, but are concerned about the time because it took 18 minutes to get there, which is quite a while in a 1-hour challenge. Earth apologizes and says he would like to disarm the traps faster, but it's very risky. The Rangers tell him not to worry because they know it's a tough job. They descend to the 2nd floor and encounter Whites and skeleton soldiers on the way. The Pink Ranger asks to handle it and uses her glorious, lovely flash power to destroy the Whites. However, those skeleton soldiers can dispel the spell, unlike the ones they faced on the previous floor. More Whites appear. So they use their weapons and split into groups. Earth, Pink, and Blue will deal with the Whites due to their magical attacks, and the rest will handle the soldiers attacking with physical damage. Thanks to the magic wind arrows, Earth manages to defeat some Whites. After the battle, they find the path to the 4th floor. However, 40 minutes have passed since they spent a lot of time dealing with those challenging monsters. Therefore, there won't be time to reach the 10th floor. They decide to go to the 5th floor on that expedition. Further on, Earth enters a room and feels a terrible sensation as if the Reaper were caressing his face. Then they hear desperate screams from another group coming from the door. Before they can think about what to do, Red kicks the door open and enters quickly. The rest of the group follows, and when everyone enters, the door closes, revealing that it's a trap that will only open when they complete the room's mission. Inside, another group of warriors is struggling to face a legion of skeleton soldiers. Red orders the entire group to help. Earth is suspicious and uses his threat detection ability, but doesn't find anything. Thus, he is free to fight with all his strength. Then they all start battling. Earth uses his Gatling arrow and Aeolian dust arrow abilities to kill some Whites. The Rangers with physical attack weapons hit the skeleton soldiers. Meanwhile, the magic-using Rangers use their healing abilities to assist the wounded warriors so they can return to the fight. In the end, they combine their attacks, creating a massive explosion and completing the room's mission. Consequently, all the doors open. The warriors thank Red for his help. Then the treasure chest in the room appears. One of the warriors is eager to open it, but Earth tries to convince him not to do it because he detected a trap. The warrior gets angry for not wanting to share the loot and claims that he also has theft skills, so he would have noticed a trap if there was one. Earth then tells them that they don't want the treasure and only asks the warrior to wait until they leave the room to open it. They exit, and the Rangers don't understand why Earth gave up on the treasure. He explains that the room had another trap, one that kills you with your own greed. Then the door closes, and they hear the screams of the warriors. Time runs out, and they return to the dungeon entrance. Outside, the Blue Ranger asks Earth a question. He wonders how Earth had noticed the 2nd trap on the treasure chest while the other warrior with theft skills didn't. Therefore, he asks if Earth has reached level 20. Earth doesn't give an exact number because it would be rude, but confirms that he's surpassed level 20. In reality, he has already surpassed level 30 but keeps it a secret. Yellow suggests sharing the earnings, even though the adventure didn't yield much. Earth says he's already satisfied with the increase in his theft skills. Red says that if he's satisfied, he's happy. However, Yellow wanted to explore the dungeon even more and reach the 10th floor. Green explains that because of the time that was very difficult and he prefers to thoroughly explore each level. He even shows a map he made of the 1st floor in its entirety. The rest of the group doubts the quality of the map a bit because he has difficulty with directions. Anyway, Green says that the map will be useless next time because the place is generated randomly. Red thanks Earth for his help and says he plans to introduce him to the Black Ranger, so he asks to send a friend request. Earth accepts and also expresses gratitude, and they shake hands. Later, at the blacksmith's, Earth tries to build a tool to disarm traps more quickly and reach the 10th floor of the dungeon. The problem is that if it's too thin, it will break easily, but when he tries to create a sturdier tool, it ends up being too thick. Black sees that the boy is struggling and decides to help. He asks to see the tool and makes some adjustments. When he hands it back to Earth, it's perfect. Earth returns happily with his tool, but is surprised by the sudden appearance of the Fairy Queen. He notices that she's wearing her complete outfit and asks why. She replies that she's going to distribute contract crystals to the new adventurers. With so many new players, this will be a long job, even with her human assistance, but she needs to deliver as many crystals as possible. She then bids farewell to Earth and says she'll meet her dear husband later. He gets angry and hits the fairy's head with his fan, reminding her that they're not married. Since the Fairy Queen is working so hard, Earth decides to do the same. So he cuts some wood and makes many arrows for his bow to use in the next attempt in the dungeon. Then he decides to cook, but the fairy returns. She's exhausted after so much work. She says that she got very angry because all the men wanted to know her measurements, what kind of boyfriend she likes, and her favorite food. Moreover, they asked strange questions like what she thought of fairs. When she mentioned that, the perverts had a creepy smile because they would actually enjoy that. Earth feels sorry for the fairy and she appeals to him for a bit of affection and asks him to sign a marriage form. She says that with that form, they will be officially married, but Earth goes crazy at the idea because he doesn't want to get married. So he decides to make a meat bun using his level 50 cooking skill. The fairy is very happy and rests her head on Earth's lap, and this time he decides to please her a little just for that day. After putting together a set of tools, Earth spends several days entering the dungeon alone, aiming to improve his lockpicking and trap disarming skills. In the beginning, Earth makes mistakes all the time, triggering traps, causing damage, and sometimes even losing his life. But after much practice and effort, Earth finally reaches level 50 in his thieving skill. With this achievement, he gains the option to evolve into a higher ranked skill. Earth evaluates his choices and discovers that he can evolve into Superior Theft, essentially a more powerful version of the theft skill, despite performing almost the same actions. His other option was to evolve into a skill called Benevolent Theft, allowing him to steal from monsters and get a bonus when stealthily attacking, things a normal thief couldn't do. However, this skill requires more experience to evolve. Still, Earth decides to go for Benevolent Theft as it seems to be the more enjoyable choice. After choosing his new skill, he receives a call from the Red Ranger. Earth had already met the gang of 6 Rangers, but he hadn't seen the Black Ranger yet. The two are introduced and the team gathers in the dungeon, where Earth quickly befriends the guy. The Red Ranger imagined that the two would get along, but he didn't expect them to bond so well. Earth clicks with the Black Ranger because both get equally excited about disarming traps. They get so enthusiastic that the other team members find their excitement strange. After meeting the heroes, Earth continues to explore the dungeon alone. He disarms more traps, increasing his success rate and leveling up his Benevolent Theft skill. Additionally, while exploring the dungeon, Earth gains a better understanding of how the monsters in the area function. They are attracted to light, so Earth discovers that by using his long-range vision ability, which allows him to see in the dark, he can significantly reduce the number of battles and sneak past monsters without being seen, avoiding unnecessary fights. Thanks to this discovery, Earth can move deeper into the dungeon, reaching the staircase to the penultimate level alone without needing any team assistance. However, he has just over 5 minutes to finish the dungeon due to the 1-hour time limit. Earth thinks that's a very short period to reach the end of the dungeon, knowing that the penultimate floor has liches. Still, he decides to take the risk and see how far he can go. Hurrying due to the time constraint, as soon as he reaches the floor, he encounters a lich. He's afraid of being seen, but fortunately, the monster doesn't spot him due to the lack of light. Some time ago, the Rangers warned Earth to be careful on the penultimate floor, precisely because of those creatures. Liches can use status attacks and summon nearby monsters, causing significant problems, especially for a solo player like Earth. Because of this, he knew he couldn't face any of those monsters at all costs. Fortunately, his plan of not using light works, and Earth manages to pass through the entire floor without running into any troublesome monsters, reaching the end of that level. However, to get to the staircase leading to the last level, he needs to pass through thousands of traps, and unfortunately, he doesn't have time to disarm them all. Earth decides to take the risk and try to pass through the traps with his wind magic. He tries his best to land in the right spots, but despite all his efforts, he ends up stepping on one of the traps. Earth thinks it's his end but decides not to give up since he was so close to his goal. He quickly dodges all the traps and safely reaches the staircase to the last level. Upon reaching there, Earth is surprised that he wasn't kicked out of the dungeon since his time should have already ended. He checks his timer and discovers that he reached the last level with only 0.02 seconds left, and for some reason it stopped as soon as he entered the area. Earth then takes a healing potion to prepare for the journey ahead. After all, what mattered was that he had reached a level no other player had achieved so far, and Earth was determined to go all the way. He starts descending the thousands of stairs in that place, and after a while he hears a voice of a man coming out of nowhere. Earth wonders where it's coming from, and the man begins to say that he didn't expect anyone to reach that place alone. The stranger introduces himself as Andra, a knight of the Empire. Then he asks Earth to listen to his story while they descend the stairs. And so, Andra recounts that many years ago, his nation ordered him to investigate the labyrinth of the dungeon and seal it. Andra fulfilled the order and took a large army with him, but everyone lost their lives to the monsters and traps of the location. Andra continues the story, explaining that as the last survivor, he continued navigating the labyrinth alone until he reached a deep room. However, as soon as he entered it, he got trapped in a completely empty place with no air to breathe. He tells Earth that after that, he was transformed into a skeleton knight and forced to protect the dungeon, meaning Andra went to seal the labyrinth and ended up being transformed into its guardian. Earth then asks if the room still exists in the labyrinth, and Andra replies that he destroyed it, making Earth think that even with his tragic end, Andra tried to be a noble knight. The man reveals that he's waiting for Earth at the bottom of the stairs and that Earth must put an end to his life. Andra says he endured all this time, resisting his heart turning into that of a monster, but he's tired and wants to be free and reunite with his comrades. Suddenly, the stairs in the place start disappearing without any warning. Earth tries to escape but ends up falling into a long descent. Next, he encounters Andra, who had just succumbed to his skeleton knight form, no longer able to resist and losing his essence. Earth hits the skeleton knight with his arrows, but it only makes him angry. The two start fighting, and the skeleton quickly proves to be agile and strong. Still, Earth manages to evade his attacks, using his shield for protection and then attacking the skeleton with vials that cause flames in the area. He continues shooting arrows since he can't fight at close range without a sword. However, the skeleton knight realizes his fighting style and uses an attack that makes Earth's bow fly away. With no other choice, he uses his trump card, his shield bow, to keep attacking. Unfortunately, his opponent finds the battle amusing, showing no signs of feeling threatened. The worst part is that Earth knows he has a point. After all, his secret bow isn't his best weapon, as it can only shoot special arrows, and he can't use any of his archer skills. Nevertheless, Earth exerts himself, moving quickly, trying to win in any way possible. The skeleton knight starts getting irritated with his opponent's constant movement. He then uses a power to increase his speed and attacks Earth, throwing the boy against the wall. Earth panics because he realizes he can't move. The skeleton knight admits he didn't expect to use his ability and says he'll end the fight, which had already lasted too long. He declares that he'll send Earth to his god, but seconds before he attacks, Earth manages to move and quickly dodges the strike. He kicks the skeleton and declares that there are no gods in that world. For Earth, the only thing present is human will, fighting to survive even when everything goes wrong. He decides to show his will to his opponent. Earth jumps to his steel whip and binds the skeleton knight. Then he uses the ring's magic and asks the fairies to grant his wish. While Earth casts the spell, the skeleton realizes he's casting a spell and tries to stop it by attacking with his weapon, breaking Earth's shield. Even without any defense, he remains focused on finishing the spell. Then the circle outlining the power area appears. The skeleton knight attempts to attack again to prevent the spell from completing, but Earth moves faster and casts Prism Nova. The attack area hits the opponent, and Earth hopes for the enchantment to result in petrification or paralysis, as they are his best attacks, and the ring's ability works randomly. Unfortunately, Earth sees that the magic didn't grant any of his attacks, and the skeleton is still alive, albeit damaged. However, his luck appears. The fairy queen appears to help Earth, thanks to the power of his ring. She casts a spell on the skeleton knight, and Earth seizes the opportunity to run to his bow. With it in his hands and his adversary petrified, Earth uses all possible attacks with his bow, hitting the opponent with several arrows. To finish, he throws two vials that cause an explosion in the area. Thus, Earth successfully concludes the battle. Andra returns to his human form and congratulates the boy on his victory. The knight explains that Earth managed to defeat him before his soul disappeared, which was even better than he expected, as he got to meet his end as a human and not as a monster. Andra still admits that he thought Earth had no chance of winning as he was fighting alone. However, as grateful as he is, his time is running out. So Andra hurries and says that, as a reward, Earth can keep his knight's sword. It was already quite damaged and couldn't be used in battle, but it could be sold as an antique for a certain amount of money. Earth thanks and accepts the gift. Afterward, Andra says that even if Earth didn't believe in gods, he did because he found his end still as a human, which for him is luck that only a god could give. His former companions appear to take Andra, and he bids farewell, saying he will pray for God to bless Earth's path. After his departure, the doors open and all players receive an urgent announcement. The game says that one of the secret bosses has been defeated, unlocking a new type of weapon, the Knight's Sword, a weapon superior to a common sword with long reach and powerful attack. As the announcement states that one of the secret bosses has been defeated, Earth thinks it means that there are others in the dungeon and probably more weapons to be unlocked. Later, after the long adventure, Earth tries to repair his equipment that was broken during the battle against the Skeleton Knight. However, as they were severely damaged, he thanks the materials for their help and turns them into a new shield. But his new bow and leather equipment became junk, and Earth recognizes that they need repairs, which will undoubtedly weigh on his pocket. Luckily, he got Andrew's sword as a reward, which could help in that regard. However, even though Earth managed to finish the dungeon alone and defeat one of the secret bosses, there were still others in the game to be defeated. In a dimly lit room, a woman asserts that player PN0EA seems to be having fun, and the man she's talking to responds that his learning seems to be progressing rapidly thanks to that archer, and they need to thank him. The woman reveals that she has a problem because PN1EB is complaining about getting bored. The man gives a mischievous smile and allows her to take a walk. Back with his group, Earth thanks his friends for the invitation. Sway informs that Nora and Kazamine can't play today, so he suggests they find a rogue to increase the team's damage. Earth counters that they would only have Millie as a healer that way. Millie says the plan is to have a new healer today. Earth shows some impatience for being a newcomer and mentions that she hasn't even arrived yet. Sway feels awkward and informs that she will be late, but Earth tries to show empathy for the group's decision, saying he doesn't mind if she's a little late. Rage notes that she has a strong personality, and Earth continues to make an effort to be understanding, saying it's just a matter of him not caring about it. Sway apologizes and explains that there was no one else available for today, but Earth reassures his partner, saying there was nothing to be done because no tank or healer was available, and Zwei becomes more relaxed. The novice healer arrives, displaying quite a bit of arrogance, thinking that the whole group was there just to welcome her. Zwei scolds the girl for being late and informs Earth that her name is Elizabeth, but that she goes by Eliza to shorten it. She's a good mage, so no one should worry. Earth feels awkward about his companion's concern in introducing the newcomer and realizes how much his friends respect him as the guild leader. Zwei insists that Eliza apologize to the leader for the delay, but the healer disdains Earth, saying he looks like a weak archer, questioning if he will really be useful because he seems almost like an NPC. Confidently, Earth responds that he will prove his worth in combat inside the dungeon. Arriving there, Earth begins the mission by disarming several traps easily and showing great knowledge about them, leaving Eliza perplexed. She admits that at least he is useful for that. On the 5th floor, Zwei says the group needs to rest, but Eliza retorts that there's no time for that. The rest of the group warns that they need to proceed carefully from there because dangerous creatures live on that floor. Earth knows they are the lesser liches. Eliza loses her tough demeanor and asks if these enemies are really dangerous. Earth explains that no physical damage works against them, and they use various status effects to stop the opponent's movements. They are so feared that their nickname is Trauma Generators. Millie calms the group and states that she can undo freezing and paralysis effects, and Eliza cures petrification. Rona adds that she has learned spells that can help, and Zwei reminds them that they have dealt with a lesser lich before. Earth is alerted that 12 enemies are approaching, 4 of them being lesser liches. Zwei makes sure there are no traps in the room, and the guild prepares for battle right there because it is dangerous to walk through the dungeon. While everyone thinks about the strategy they will use, Eliza is trembling with fear. Zwei orders the girl to use an attack spell, but she is paralyzed with fear. The enemies approach, and Earth takes the lead, firing a wide arrow. Eliza uses Holy Ray, and Millie finishes with Explosion. An explosion covers the opponents, but as the dust settles, they continue advancing unharmed. Rage protects the group with defensive abilities, aggro control, and taunt. An enemy tries to bypass his shield, but his defense magic prevents him from reaching the group. Taking advantage of the protection, Rona uses War Spirit Twin Fists, weakening the enemy with her fists, and Zwei finishes him off. However, the other enemies emerge from behind the guild, and Rage is petrified by the liches. Zwei asks Eliza to heal Rage and warns that without a tank, it will quickly be in trouble, but the mage is still scared. The lich tries to attack Eliza, but Rona protects her, keeping the enemy away. Meanwhile, the rest of the group is suffering and spending all their mana, but Earth throws 3 potions at the opponents, destroying them. Now more relaxed, Eliza heals Rage with Rapidum, Commandant Lux, and Stone Break Cure. With their tank back in the fight, the group gains confidence and finishes the battle. After the battle, Eliza asks Earth why he didn't use the potions earlier, as they were so powerful. The archer explains that they are dangerous to use and you can't carry many at once. The mage argues that if he had been faster, he could have avoided much of the situation, but Sui gets irritated and intervenes, telling her to stop complaining about the leader. Eliza threatens to start an argument, but Millie tells the two to behave, reminding them that they are not only with guild members today. The two brawlers stop instantly. Earth has fun thinking that Millie is scary when she gets angry. Eliza apologizes for being scared, but the archer motivates the mage because the dungeon is not over yet, and the group needs her healing, making Eliza more excited. The guild completes the dungeon and celebrates the victory, planning to play again sometime. As they say their goodbyes, the figure of that mysterious woman appears again, watching the group. The next day, Earth realizes that two new weapons have appeared in the game, a Japanese bao and an utachi. Then he remembers that Kazumine from Blue Color had a somewhat samurai-like style and would love the utachi. An apparently innocent girl approaches the archer and asks if his name is Earth. The protagonist notices that the girl has pointed ears, Japanese clothing, and dragon horns, and is not a player avatar. He confirms his name and asks for hers. She avoids the question, saying she's like the younger sister of the fairy queen. Earth raises an alert and senses trouble. He asks the reason the girl sought him out, and she replies that she's interested in experiencing his lips, moving directly toward him. He pushes the girl away with a fan and says she's just like her sister. The girl finds it amusing that Earth hit her with a fan and says she understands why her sister liked him. Earth finds all of this somewhat ridiculous, but the girl continues, saying that her sister mentioned that the archer made wonderful food and she would like to try it. Earth refuses, saying he's going to the armor shop, but the girl interferes again, saying she'll go along because there won't be a chance to get out again like today. The archer is defeated by her insistence, and they go together. Arriving there, the girl gets excited about the equipment, saying she's impressed that human hands can create such things, but Earth tells her not to touch anything. The shopkeeper says that Earth brought a cute girl to the shop today, but he avoids the subject, asking the attendant to repair the cloak he's wearing. The shopkeeper says, judging by the state of the cloak, it would be easier for him to buy a new one than to fix it. He remembers that he has abused the cloak a lot and asks for a new armor, made of wild bear skin and silver, which he had in his inventory. The blacksmith designs a defense plus 70 armor with durability and motivation bonuses, charging 12,000 glow for labor, saying she'll let him know when it's ready. The girl with pointed teeth interferes again, saying that now Earth can cook for her. So Earth prepares a rabbit steak with herbs, and the girl loves the dish, praising every detail of the recipe. Earth thanks her, and she repeats it twice more. The archer jokes that it's clear she's really the fairy queen's sister. He asks if she is also a fairy like her sister, but the girl says she can't give details about that and not reveal her real name, telling Earth he can call her whatever he wants. The archer calls the girl Ryuchan because she has Japanese dragon horns. She likes the nickname and plans to visit Earth from time to time. Earth hopes she doesn't cause any trouble, and meanwhile, an important announcement appears for all players. Earth goes to his blacksmith friend, and they comment that the announcement was about a hidden detail in the game, that stronger abilities would only be learned if players became specialists in a playstyle, choosing between mage or warrior, for example. Earth thinks this will annoy players, and Blacks asks what he will do since he has only a month to review the abilities, and maybe this will cause problems in future fights if he doesn't change. Earth reflects that if he specializes only in physical attacks, he will have more firepower in the game, but he remembers that the current style is more fun for him and decides to continue as it is. Blacks comments that players who are craftsmen part-time are disappearing, and if a nice guy like Earth stays there, he will feel less lonely. Earth is happy with the compliment from his comrade and reflects that making people happy with food is also a form of strength, and he doesn't want to lose that. The armor is ready and Earth loves the result, happy with the durability and motivation bonuses. The blacksmith asks to keep Earth's old cloak, thinking he was going to throw it away, but he says he'll figure something out with the equipment. Earth analyzes that in this game it's possible to touch equipment directly, and that's why he gets attached to his weapons and feels sad to say goodbye. To him, getting rid of his old cloak is like meeting someone and having to say goodbye forever. The fairy queen appears in Earth's path and puts up a barrier around everyone. First, she apologizes and says that Earth will never be able to make a contract with the fairy, making him wonder if fairies hate him so much. But it's the opposite. Fairies love Earth too much. The queen even brought superior fairies with her, and all of them would love to make a contract with the archer. However, the citizen fairies found out about this, and 80% of the population went to the queen's gates and asked for permission to make a contract with Earth. As the fairy queen, she cannot ignore the will of the people, and if a fairy made a contract with him, it could cause a revolt in the kingdom. The lack of a contract with a fairy can make Earth's journey much more difficult, but he doesn't complain, saying it's part of life. The queen is surprised by Earth's understanding and says he is really different, compensating the archer with 2 powers. These 2 techniques are recreations of powerful abilities created during the time of the 21st Fairy Sovereign. To The first is 7 falling stars, which increases the bow's damage when hitting 7 arrows in a row on the target within 30 seconds. The other ability is Sacrifice Bow, which sacrifices all MP, 90% of HP, and his own bow in exchange for firing an extremely powerful arrow. The Queen warns that this power is very dangerous and should only be used as a last resort because it sacrifices almost all of his attributes and even his weapon. She explains that the stats can be recovered with good rest. Earth reflects that his beloved weapon would be gone forever if he used the techniques, so he must think carefully before resorting to such an extreme ability. He says he shouldn't use the sacrifice ability but will practice the other technique. The Queen asks to keep it a secret and informs that the path to the Fairy Kingdom is open to all adventurers in a new game update. She invites Earth for a visit once the path is open. Before leaving, Earth gives a large amount of food to the fairies and says that the next time they meet, it will be in the Fairy Kingdom. One of the fairies says there's no need to wait so long and that she could meet Earth in secret. The Queen gets angry and jealous, questioning why the fairy wants to see Earth without the group, but the fairy replies that she wants to make a contract with the archer and finds it unfair that the Queen always visits him alone. Awkwardly, Earth smiles and realizes that the Fairy Kingdom update will stir things up a lot.